He said, don't be afraid to call the people you should be calling. Jimmy Franklin is coming up next with his son, Andrew. Jimmy calls me. He was only the #1 agent in RE/MAX in Texas, pretty good sized state, for years. I always saw his name, but did I call him? No, right? So somebody else calls me and says, I got this Jimmy Franklin guy I want you to talk to. I talk to him. He joins. He goes, Gene, if you would have told me about this like 4 years ago, dude, I would have been here. I said, Jimmy, I didn't think about calling you. Does that make sense to you guys? Take that home with you today, right? Jimmy and his son Andrew only run the #1 team in Texas. I don't know how many units they do because I get lost, how many units and volume. But coming up here, I want you to notice that Jimmy told me that at 7 years old, he made his first hole-in-one. Golfers in here, is that cool? 60 years later, he's looking for #2. Okay? And his son Andrew, when you see him up here, it's hard. He's so tall. He's so tall. He's huge. And when you see how tall he is, you're going to wonder that he played college basketball. Let's give it up for Jimmy and Andrew Franklin from Houston, Texas. Woo! Come on, boys. Come on, baby. Take it home. Take it home, baby.
How's everyone doing?
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Gene. So, first of all, I want to shout out to Monica Foster. When we first came over to EXP, a very short time later, we got a $200 million team that followed us, Monica Foster. And Monica told me today, she's always been very supportive. She told me to quit saying so much. So when this speech starts to deteriorate, it's her fault. It's Monica's fault. So when, are you guys hanging in there in this brutal week in Maui? Is this the greatest place to be for a mastermind ever? Oh, yeah. So over the years, I have spoken a lot about my story, youthful mistakes that I made, obstacles that I overcame, things that I did better later on that, led to success and personal redemption. And I always thought my story was sort of special, sort of unique. But then 4.5 years ago, we joined EXP. And since then, I've been to more events, EXP events, than I did in my 32 years at RE/MAX. And I heard unbelievable stories from extremely successful teams, successful people. And I realized that really my story wasn't all that unique, all that special. And in fact, I think Andrew's story of success probably is a little bit more interesting. He was top of his graduating class, lots of great friends, 5A all-district basketball player, went to a private school, got a job smack dab in the middle of the financial crisis when a lot of his pledge brothers were struggling to get employment. And I think a lot of times when people have things laid out for them nicely like that, they don't have a lot of bumps in the road, it's easy to go into kind of a, sort of a cruise control, automatic pilot kind of situation and not be as great as you can be. Or worse, end up like the train wreck kids on the HBO show Succession. So Andrew, anybody that knows Andrew and my daughter Sarah Savard,
Where's
stand
Sarah?
up.
Where's Sarah?
Sarah is the co-owner of the Franklin team. Anybody knows that when these guys came over and took over the team that I left them, or that I sold them, almost 10 years ago, that there was going to be no cruise control. And it hasn't been like that, obviously, for one moment. You'll hear a little bit more about what they've done since they took over the team that I built. So, again, as I was mentioning, my story is quite a bit different from Andrew's. I was a terribly underachieving college dropout slacker who sort of just drifted through my 20s. But I will give you some advice. If you do drop out of college, make sure you look your best when you're going for jobs. This is me in my Charles Manson look in the 70s. So in that time frame, I did drift through my 20s. I hit rock bottom, and it was actually my turnaround, my comeback, if you will, on the same day. It was a very memorable day. It was my 27th birthday, July 30th, 1982, 27th birthday. Closed on my first house, Harris County bond money, 13.75%. And then third thing that happened is my boss called me into his office and laid me off, all on the same day.
Things were not looking good for my childhood back then.
Big buzzkill, terrible housewarming gift. So, and I didn't know it, but that was really the turnaround for me. I sat, and I didn't know it, of course. I was sitting across the desk, borrowing tissue from my boss. But that was also the last day that I ever had an employer for the rest of my life, which is great, because if you don't work for somebody, they can't fire you. That's a little lesson there. If you don't work for somebody, you can't get fired. So anyway, I went to a short time later. I decided to get my real estate license. Like all my decisions in those days, no thought, no epiphany. Just, hey, why the hell not? Nothing else is working. Let me try this. But I turned out I learned fairly quickly I had a knack for the business, and it turned into something that, and of course, when you're good at something, you tend to want to do that thing. And so I'd finally found my thing, and I became a successful realtor. And gradually, over the years, I built one of the top teams in the world until about a decade ago, right? I stepped back, and Andrew and Sarah took over the team, and then took what I had handed them, which was pretty special, massively built it, and made me look like the slacker that I used to be, again, all over again. So, how did this transformation happen? The first thing that I figured out early on is I was never going to be a script guy. I was never going to be good at script, and you can tell that from the speaking here tonight that I'm still that guy. But that what was going to drive me and drive my business was going to be relationships. And I felt like the business, fairly early, I felt like the business was less transaction-driven and more relationship-driven. Transactions were great. That's what kept the lights on at a time where the lights staying on weren't necessarily a given. But that my long-term success was going to be making relationships. I tried to meet someone new every day, tried to learn about them, their likes and their dislikes. And I did not make those relationships contingent upon what I thought they could do for me. A relationship was good enough right there. Then the other thing is, if I was lucky enough to sell them a home, the relationship should not end when the commission check clears. It's much, much, much easier and much just as important to try to have retention. Relationship retention is every bit as important as creating relationship in the first place. The second, thank you. This next thing I think is something that really should be so obvious, and it just isn't. I don't know why, but don't be the smartest person in the room. If you are, go find another room.
This one's easy for my dad.
It's very easy for my dad. unless it's about old rock and roll songs or Super Bowl champions, I am definitely not going to ever be the smartest guy in the room. Find successful people. Ask them. I have as big an ego as anyone else, but when it came to asking for advice and finding people that were more successful than me and smarter than me, totally no ego on that. I always thought that was going to be the way to go. There are no dumb questions. And if you think about it, let me ask you a question. what company in the world is the best company where you can find insanely successful people who have totally willing to share? Does anybody know the answer to that question? What's the most? Exactly, EXP, the company, the place that we're all at, and more than likely your group, your small group, has those kind of people. So it's an extremely perfect place to be to follow this particular one. That should be the easiest one of all. Now, as I mentioned, relationships are huge, but what is even better than relationships? Probably not going to know this, but you'll see it in a. That is a bunch of relationships. Handle properly, a relationship will begat a relationship, which will begat more relationships. And before you know it, you've got a business. You've got something built up. Compounding relationships. Now I'm going to give an example here, and I'm going to apologize to my kids because they had to hear this too many times when they were younger. And Sarah's over there rolling her eyes already right now. But if I gave you a penny, and then I doubled it for 31 days straight, you'd have 2 cents on day 2, you'd have 4 cents on day 3, you'd have 8 cents on day 4. I think on day 10 you'd have a little over $5. Does anybody know how much you'd have on day 31? 10,700,000 and some change. It's 31 days, not 30. But you're right, 5 would be 30. So point being is that, and so that's Albert Einstein, of course, compounding interest explanation. But I think relationship compounding is even more important can be more powerful than interest compounding. And is there any room in the world that understands relationships, compounding, and exponential growth more than this room? Right, Gene? Right, Brent? I mean, where is it known better than this place right here? So, one last thing, and I'm going to turn this over to Andrew, and the speech will get a lot better. But I'm grown up and lived in Texas all my life. Love Texas, except for 4 months of the year. And thanks to EXP and compounding relationships, we now have a place in Park City, Utah, for the summer on a world-class golf course. It's where we're going to have our mastermind this next August, and future masterminds as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Andrew now.
Thanks, Dad. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Sarah and I have been able to do to grow and scale the real estate business that my dad handed to us about 10 years ago. How does that sound? So y'all don't want to scale a real estate business? How does that sound? All right. Before I do that, I have an announcement to make, though. My beautiful wife back in the corner, it is her 40th birthday today. She doesn't look a day over 25, but most important person in my world. So if you see her in the hall, it's the hot blonde. Wish her a happy birthday. So, my dad was bragging about me and saying all these things that I was great at, and so I just thought it would be appropriate to share a picture of me when I was a teen to sort of, I imagine you guys were picturing someone like this. So this was 2 separate occasions, me growing up in my basketball playing days. The one on the left, my hair wasn't quite long enough to get braids, so I went to Walmart to get my braids done, and the hair wasn't long enough, so the lady at Walmart ended up braiding my hair with little rubber bands. So the result was me looking like this, a lot of pain, but as you can see, very attractive. The second time was my hair was longer, so I was actually able to get full-on braids. But luckily, I grew out of this stage. by the time I went to college, and I'm just going to leave that up there for a little bit. By the time I went to college, I had grown out of this phase. I went to college on the East Coast, a school called Washington and Lee. I did play basketball in college. My dad always talked to me about money and business and investing, and so I never really thought real estate, even though it was a family business. My mom was a broker. My mom was my dad's first assistant. He had been in the business before I was born. I started my career in investment banking on Wall Street, so I was an M&A investment banker for about 6 years until I decided to join my sister, and we bought the business from my dad shortly after I got licensed in 2013. And so just going to talk about some of the things that we were able to do since we bought that business. So unlike a lot of you, we had an unfair advantage. We had a business. My dad was selling 400 to 500 homes a year. It was him and 3 agents. He was heavy in production, but he ran his business out of an Excel spreadsheet. He touched his database once a quarter with a newsletter. And so we had room for improvement for sure. And so what we realized after the first couple years, we were growing the business the same way he was. We were working hard, we were building relationships, but we realized there's had to be a better way. And so what we did was we started figuring out, like my dad mentioned, don't be the smartest person in the room. And what we realized is that there's a ton of people in this industry that you can learn from. And so I joined a Facebook group, and I made a post, and I said, we sell 600 to 700 homes a year. We don't have a CRM. What CRM should we use? And although I did get some comment, Dad, do you remember when I made that post? What did you say to that?
I said, what's a CRM?
And that is a fact. And the funny thing about those comments that I got that day is, a couple people said top producer and sync and Boomtown, all these answers, but the overwhelming majority of things I got from people were, how in the world do you sell 600 to 700 homes without a CRM? And so from that Facebook post and that Facebook group, the person that ran that group ended up being my first ever coach. We hired them. Fred Weaver and Kevin Kaufman, they're the reasons why we're at EXP now. They're my sponsors into the company. But they started talking about all the stuff that Dylan was talking about, the systems and the processes and the recruiting. And so as you can see, once we did the CRM and hired our first coach, that was just the beginning of us starting to turn my dad's business as him being a realtor to us having a real estate business. And so, we moved to EXP, we got out of production, and then we hired our integrator. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But the cool thing about this slide is it shows that we hired an integrator, but we sort of flatlined. And so at that time, we were selling about $600 million. In the last 3 years, we've sold $600 million. And as everyone says, if you're not growing, you're dying. And the cool thing about this slide is that one of our biggest lead sources during COVID just basically went away. 60% of our business was home builder referrals. And glad to talk to you guys about how we've done that and built that over the last 3 decades when we have more time. But that went away, and we were still able to sell $600 million in volume with that 60% of our business going down dramatically. And that's because we finally realized that it was who, not how. So we hired a president. She's in the room. We have 2 sales managers. We have a VP of operations. We have a VP of marketing. And so I want to talk about some big things that sort of helped us get there. So write these 2 books down. They changed my life and they changed my business life. The books are Rocket Fuel and Traction. Rocket Fuel talks about the visionary integrator relationship. A good example of that is Brent and James, right? Brent is the visionary and James is the integrator. Without James, this event doesn't happen, right? James agrees. 'Cause, 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 'cause a lot of you in this room are probably visionaries. If you don't have your integrator, you're not going to be able to grow. And so because we hired that integrator, she's now the president, Carrie Bond, raise your hand, she's here today. We were able to create a number of different ancillary businesses. We now have 6 different real estate businesses that do about 15 million of revenue, and all because we have the people, the who, not how. The other book that really changed my life was Traction. So has anyone here heard of Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS? A handful of you. Read this book, look up what EOS is. All of our businesses are on some form of EOS. And so it is a simple set of concepts and practical tools used by more than 130,000 companies. So not just real estate. A lot of companies use EOS. It really gets your vision on paper. It tells you how to hold meetings, when to do meetings, how to hire, how to get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, get the right people in the right seats. EOS has definitely changed our world. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the people aspect. Everyone's going to talk about people. You're going to hear the same themes over and over. Nothing matters more than people. If you want to scale a real estate business, whether it be production or attraction, it's going to be about hiring, getting the right talent, getting them onboarded, and then getting them into production as quick as possible. If you want to follow me on Facebook or Instagram and send me a message, I will get you all of our systems. That we now have a full onboarding system where people plug in to Trainual, and we don't have to do anything with our agents because they plug in and get them onboarded the first 60 to 90 days. We hold them accountable with the system. We recruit with the system. Everything, like Dylan said, if it's repeatable, it needs to be done with a system that you can do over and over again. Onboarding, accountability, all of that. I'm going to leave with this as the shot clock is flashing at me. 2 quotes. One was my former coach, John Cheplack, and Fred Weaver, who I mentioned. The most talented people aren't the ones accomplishing the greatest things. The most committed people are. It's a powerful quote. And then get motivated or get pissed off. Fred told me this at an event, and he basically said, hey, there's going to be people on stage that are going to inspire you, and then there's going to be people on stage that are going to piss you off because you should be up here. We might be the people that piss you off, but rather go take action and kick some butt.